Good morning. Welcome to the Humanist community in Silicon Valley's Sunday Forum. My name is Matt Courtney, and I am the recorder and a member of the board of the Humanist community. The Humanist community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, fairness, compassion, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. If these words describe your thinking, we invite you to become a member of the Humanist community if you've not already done so. Membership forms are available on our website at humanists.org. If you are listening for the first time, welcome, and we invite you to continue listening to our weekly forums and other events. You can find all of our events listed on the website, humanists.org. And please aid us in continuing to present these forums by donating to the Humanist community. You can find out how to donate to our organization on the website, humanists.org. Our online forum today, the topic is safe bystander engagement. And we only have one speaker. It's mentioned on Meetup, they have two listed, but only Erica Wiley could join us today. And looks like her work is with the social justice program of the YWCA of Silicon Valley. And this talk will describe when and how to safely interact when you see inappropriate or threatening behaviors online.
So again, my name is Erica Wiley. I am the Prevention, Education, and Community Engagement Coordinator here at YWCA. Today we're going to be talking about safe bystander engagement, how to safely intervene in situations of harm. So a little bit about our agency. We are a nonprofit organization that helps survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. We have a variety of services that we offer the community. Our support services department, we have advocacy, we have legal services, we have a crisis support line. We are not taking walk-ins. Our office is still closed, but we are still running besides not taking walk-ins like usual. We have moved to a virtual platform, so we are seeing clients virtually. And we have an emergency shelter, childcare. I am from the social justice team, so I primarily work in our schools, in our school-based programming, talking to young people, our youth about healthy relationships, setting safe boundaries, and we talk about consent, sexual assault, and domestic violence prevention. And we also have our healing center, which provides counseling to people in the community, and that's individual counseling, and we also have support groups as well. So these are some things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to know what it means to be an active bystander, have an understanding of the spectrum of violence, know how to safely intervene in situations of harm. If there's any questions throughout the presentations, like Matthew said, we could use a chat box or raise your hand. I cannot see the chat box though, so if a question comes up, if somebody could just let me know, that would be great. And then after the presentation too. Some of the stuff that we are going to be talking about is we are going to be talking about sexual assault and domestic violence. It could be heavy subjects for some people. Some of the material might be a little triggering. So please remember to take care of yourself. If something becomes too much, feel free to step away from your screen. Also, I'm available afterwards if anybody needs to talk to me privately, or I could give out my email address if anybody needs any further support. Okay, so why is it important to be a safe bystander? Why are we talking about this today? Every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services is called for a claim of child sexual abuse. Children who are harmed is usually by someone they know. I know a lot of the times when we talk to our youth and we talk to young people, one of the first things they know is like stranger danger. Whenever I talk to young people, they're like stranger danger. But in reality, it's people that we know who harm. So it's really important to talk when we're talking to young people that we let them know if anybody is making them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, however that may be, to always be able to speak up and talk to a trusted adult about that. Every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. So just right there, we can see that sexual assault and rape is very prevalent in this country. That's why it's important to be able to recognize it and also know when you can step in and help. 1 in 6 women, or 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. So if you take a second to think about that, how many women you have in your life, statistically, 1 out of those 6 women has been or will be a survivor or victim of a sexual assault. Also, we know that men are affected by sexual violence as well. The statistics aren't always as high because we don't think that men report as much as men do. There are a lot of, as much as women do, because of the barriers, the stereotypes of men being sexually assaulted. We feel that that is a barrier to reporting. I know this image isn't the best, it's very blurry, but just having to do with COVID-19 and domestic violence, we know that it's saying, everybody needs to be at home, you're safe at home, but unfortunately that is not the reality for everybody. Not everyone is safe at home. Right now, we did in the very beginning of shelter in place, we noticed that our calls, we weren't getting as many calls, but then it went up 46% in Santa Clara County. Then again, we saw a drop in calls, not because that people weren't experiencing abuse. It was more likely that people were at home with their abusers, so they weren't able to take that time to make that phone call, reach out and get help. So the shelter in place has definitely made some barriers and difficulties to people reporting domestic violence or sexual abuse in the home. And so we're still waiting to see what that looks like in the months coming up, if the shelter in place will change or lift. So we're also going to talk about some ways to be a safe bystander during the shelter in place and how we can help somebody that maybe is experiencing violence in the home. Okay, so what does it mean to be a bystander? Have we all heard that word bystander before? I'm sure. To be a bystander is to be a witness. Someone who sees a situation, may not know what to do, may think others will act or be afraid. I know that I've been in situations, and I'm sure we all have been, can think of a situation where maybe we saw something happen. Maybe it was something, as violence or something not as major, but it's still thinking like, something's happening. Like, I want to join it. I want to help. I want to do something, but I don't know how to. There's other people. Maybe someone else will help. I feel like that's an experience that we have all maybe shared. Because it can be scary, and there's lots of barriers why people don't intervene in situation harm. We're going to talk about some of those barriers today. So the bystander effect, I don't know if anybody has heard of the bystander effect before. But the idea that more people present in the situation, the less likely to help. Now, that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be scary to help a situation. Especially right now, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of situations that are coming up. So we just want to talk about those barriers and how we can actually be a safe bystander and intervene in situations of harm. Okay. So this is a little video that we like to show. But for some reason, it's not let me see. It might not let me play. I might have to go. Oh, no, so it didn't. I'm just going to escape out of this and share a different screen so we can all watch this video.
If a stranger needed help, how long would it take you to offer them a hand? According to psychology, the answer to that question may depend less on who you are as a person and more on how many people are with you at the time. In a strange paradox of human nature, the more people there are in a group, the less likely anyone is to offer help. It's called the bystander effect, and it may be a roadblock that's keeping you from showing empathy. When someone is in need, people in large groups tend to feel that they don't need to do anything because someone else will take care of it. This is known as the diffusion of responsibility. The end result is nobody does anything. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you. We started with a large group of 10 people and told them they were here today to see a product demonstration. So we're just basically looking for emotional reactions to certain products. We're not quite ready to go yet. So as you can see, you have these surveys. Go ahead, start filling them out. Take all the time you need with them. I am going to go get the product and just kind of start throwing it together, and then we're going to begin. Sound good, everyone?
Okay.
Cool. Thanks. Here's the thing, though. Everybody but one of these people wasn't in on it. We gave her a 10-minute window where she could offer to help. Let's see if she comes to my rescue. We repeated this a few more times with varying results. Sound good. Next, we tried it with a group of 5. Oh, jeez. So far, it's not looking good for people in general. Are we just plain unhelpful, or is there something to the bystander effect? To find out, let's see how helpful people are when they're all by themselves.
Hi.
The results? With our group of 10 people, it took our participants an average of 8 minutes and 1 second before they lent a hand. Excuse me, thank you.
Can I help? I just feel bad.
Participants in our groups of 5 were a little quicker, saving me from the tent with an average time of 7 minutes and 25 seconds. I'm okay.
Do you need help?
Do you want to give me a hand?
Yeah.
That'd be great, thank you.
What can I do?
But when our participants were by themselves, that is when they really shined. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, thank you so much. On average, they offered to step in just 3 minutes and 19 seconds. You were the fastest by a country mile. I have set this thing up by myself 7 times today.
That makes me sad.
You took a total of 12 seconds. Why do you think you were so quick to do it?
I like to help in any way that I can.
That's the funny thing about the bystander effect. You would think that a group with more people would mean there's a higher chance someone would do something. But people in a group are actually less likely to help.
I knew I should have just stood up and done it, but then a big part of me wanted to see what these people would do, and I was just kind of like, are any of them gonna help?
At first, I was a little shy to jump in and help, but then after a while, I just like, I'm just gonna jump in and help.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Sorry, it took 8 minutes.
When it's just the 2 of us in a space, there's like a bond that's created that's like, well, I'm not going to let you struggle on your own. And I think if there is a group of people, it's way more acceptable for me to be doing that.
It's the diffusion of responsibility.
I think that's totally true.
If something is saying jump in and offer to help, just follow that intuition. Even if no one else is saying anything, just, hey, if you can be a part of helping someone, instead of just watching them struggle, or even take out your cell phone and like tape it or something like that, which is the worst. Just offer some help.
So, now that you know about the bystander effect, ask yourself, how often do you feel like you should help someone, but don't, because you think somebody else will do it? Maybe next time, you will be that somebody. So pancake.
Okay, so this is kind of a time I like to just take a little second if we can chat and to see, has anybody, or raise your hand, or has anybody been in that situation before where you see something happening and you're just like, like, I want to help, but I don't know how, or I don't know if I should, or I don't know if we've experienced that before. I know I have.
People can use the raise hand feature if they have a comment, or I will try to notice you if you're waving your hands in the video. I'll speak for myself real quick, but I can't think of anything recently where something like that has come up where there's a possibility of helping somebody, and there's a crowd around or something like that. But I'll go with Dana. I'm trying to unmute you, but I think you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'm Dana, and I'm a classroom teacher. And every day at work, I face that. It's not really the same, but I have to make a decision about whether or not this person should solve a certain problem in the classroom themselves, or whether I should help them, because the learning process and all that. And I think that also extends to other situations sometimes, that maybe there are situations in public, like when I'm in a supermarket and somebody is thinking or hitting their kid. That's one I most often encounter. And I guess I would watch and see what happened, and then I would step forward and offer to help them. But it's a very hard decision to make.
Yeah, definitely. It is hard, and there are a lot of barriers to why we don't intervene. One in particular that I think, one incident that happened to me that I think about is I was a while back, and I was at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, and I was on the wharf, and I just noted that this little girl, and she had to be maybe 3 or 4, just standing there by herself eating a bag of chips. And there was no adult around her that I can see. And so I just stood there for a minute, and I was watching her and seeing maybe if she was going to run up to her parents or if someone was going to come up, and nothing happened. And she was just standing there. So I'm a mother, and I'm thinking, okay, well, let's see what's going on. So I just went up to her. I'm like, hi, where are your parents? Or how can I, are you by yourself? And it turned out that her family was on the beach, way down the beach, and she had just, a quick second took off and was running down, and her parents, they had no idea that she had left. And then when they found me, I was with her standing there oh, thank you so much. But it just things like that, just noticing a situation and then thinking, is this a safe situation, or what's going on here? Let me go and check and see what's going on. That's one example that I have of, being a bystander, seeing something and then intervening. So now I'm going to go back to, I think we have another one, Herman.
We have a couple people with their hands up.
Okay, yeah, let's hear about it.
So I have Alex and Senna is next. So
okay. I was going to comment. Well, 2 things. One is I can think of a few instances where I have helped someone who looked like they had a problem. But I've always been alone when I did. I can't think of any instance where I've been with a group. And I think part of the problem is I'm kind of suspicious. And if someone is asked for help, my first thought is, am I being used for something? Is this some sort of scam? And if I'm with a group, I'm more concerned about it, because I'm worried about how I look to them. Whereas that doesn't arise if I'm on my own.
Yeah, definitely. That's a real fear too. Not knowing if somebody is just trying to, get over on you, and you're wanting to help and do something, but you're is this, real? Is this, am I really helping somebody? Are they trying to get over on me? Thank you for sharing.
Can we have Dick Hewitson?
Well, as usual, I'm doing the opposite of what seems to happen, but I had a very strange experience. A woman was crossing the street, and she had a disability, which I don't now remember, but it was obvious that she had some sort of disability, and was hit by a car. and I just immediately ran over to see what I could do, and talked with her and gave her my card so that if any way I could be of any help to her. So the police called me and asked me all kinds of questions of which I knew none of the answers. Because of course all I saw was her being hit. They asked me how many people were in the automobile and all kinds of questions like that. And I knew absolutely nothing. But anyway, so I ended up not being an awfully lot of help, but I tried.
Yeah, but thank you for sharing. Still going over and helping and seeing what you can do. It seems like there wasn't that thought. You just went into action. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like Herman.
I had an experience several years ago in New York City. My wife and I were visiting a friend who was in the hospital. And as we were leaving, beginning to walk out on a crowded New York's street, there was an altercation between two cars on the street in front of us. Apparently an example of road rage. And these guys were yelling at each other. And it quickly escalated to the point where one of them went into his car and took out a tire iron and went for the other guy with this huge metal, well, one of these things that to loosen the nuts and take off the tire. It's really a great weapon. Instinctively, I ran out to separate them. My wife was horrified because I was entering into a situation where they were going at each other and they were so angry. I tried to separate them with some difficulty. And the interesting thing is that my presence and inadequacy in really taking care of the situation prompted other people who were bystanders at the time to come and help me. So that's another observation, that if someone takes the initiative and does something in a situation that could have violent effects, it does prompt other people to come. And we did separate them, and they went back in their cars and left.
Thank you for bringing that up, Herman, because that's such a great point, because usually it just takes that one person. And if you are in a situation where there are a lot of people around, usually that one person acts, you'll have more people joining. It's like that barrier of that fear has been broken, and now everybody wants to jump in and help. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. And also, sometimes when we're in these situations, our mind, we don't really know how we're going to react until we're in it, until we're there, and our body will just tell us what to do. It's like, okay, we're going to jump in, we're going to help. Or maybe we're like, okay, well, we're afraid, so we don't want to jump right in. So today we're going to talk about other ways of how we can safely intervene. If we're scared for our own safety, what are some other things that we can do? So I'm going to go back to sharing my slides, and we'll talk some more. So when I talk about the bystander effect and where it came from, it started with this case right here with Kitty back in 1964 in Queens, New York. She was murdered outside her apartment complex. She was, it was a brutal attack that lasted over 30 minutes. She was stabbed 14 times, and there were 38 bystanders while this was happening. After her attack, the police went and they talked to neighbors, and there were many people who said that they heard her screaming, they heard her fighting for her life, they heard the attack, but it was kind of the same. Everybody had the same idea, somebody else will step in, somebody else will probably call, somebody else will go help. So this happened, and so again, 38 people heard it and did nothing for this woman. So this led to psychologists and scientists thinking, why is this? And then doing research on the bystander effect. Then we have another case here in Richmond, California, 2009. A outside of a homecoming dance on school campus, a girl was gang raped for 2.5 hours with 20 witnesses. 20 people stood by and watched. They even recorded this attack, this assault. It wasn't till after one of the boys went home and told his sister about what happened that she called 911 and reported the crime. And the boys involved did end up going to prison, but there was 20 people watching. And I think this was on school ground. So talking about like what could have happened, you know, like instead of taking your phone out and recording, and this is something that we talk to our young people about, instead of recording, because that's really, I mean, technology, that's what people do. They, you know, record. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes we need to, you know, catch that act and we want to have that evidence. But in a situation like this, people were recording not for the right reasons. So talking to people like, what else could have been done here? Somebody, you know, if it's on school campus, I guarantee there was staff. Some campuses even have security. Somebody could have ran and got somebody else. Somebody could have yelled out, stop, you know, principal's coming or something like that, and to stop this assault, but nobody did. So I think it's important to talk about these situations with everyone, especially too with our youth, so they know what to do, because a lot of the times young people don't know what to do. They don't know what should they do in a situation like this. We would hope they make the right decision, but how can they if nobody's ever talked to them about it? So there's many ways that people could have safely intervened in this situation. Okay, so now let's talk about barriers to intervening. So there's a lot. You don't want to, the danger, you know, you're afraid. It's a scary situation. Maybe if it's more of a situation where, say it's at work and you know that one of your coworkers is being sexually harassed, thinking like, well, I don't want to step in because I'm scared that harassment will now turn towards me and now I will be a victim of that harassment. I hear this a lot. Well, it's not my business. It doesn't have to do with me. You know, it's not my business. Why should I help? But I mean, if, you know, that was my daughter in that 2009 Richmond case, you know, I sure would hope that somebody would intervene. And just thinking it more as like, well, this is somebody's, you know, this is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's sister. This is somebody's best friend. Like, we need to kind of take a step back and get out of that bubble of it's not my business, where it's affecting the community. We live in this community, so it is our business. I just didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to get in trouble. This can happen in different situations. If someone sees a crime happening, maybe they want to intervene, they want to help, but they also don't want to get in trouble for it. You know, what if later on the police show up and then they get questioned and somehow they feel they might get looped into the criminals part of this? Social conformity, that's kind of become like, well, nobody's doing anything, I'm not going to do anything. Well, I don't want to stand out, I don't want to be different. And these are all real feelings and real, you know, barriers. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what are some ways that we can safely intervene in situations of harm. So YWCA, we talk about 3 different ways. So there's directly, we can directly intervene. Some of the stories shared here today, we see something happening, we're going to go up and check in and see, you know, how can we assist people? How can we help? Now, this might look different in a situation of sexual assault or domestic violence. And it could be a lot more difficult because sometimes it's hard to tell if somebody, you know, is in a situation of harm when it comes to sexual violence. So maybe you see something happening, maybe you see a couple fighting, it looks like things are escalating. You can go over and just check in and be like, hey, you know, everything okay over here? Maybe look at the person that you think is experiencing the abuse and check in with them. You know, like, are you okay? You know, hey, let's go take a walk, trying to de-escalate that situation. Again, and this is if you feel safe. We have partnering with somebody, whether that be if it's something major, a crime is happening, somebody is being hurt, do we need to call emergency services? Do we need to get somebody help that way? If it's at work, we see somebody being sexually harassed, can we go talk to HR? Can we say, hey, I saw this happening, it made me feel uncomfortable, I think that there might be something more to it, and I just wanted to let somebody know. That could be partnering with somebody. I talk to young people, if you see something happening, maybe partnering with a teacher, partnering with a principal, partnering with a trusted adult, things like that. That's how we can partner to get help for somebody. Then divert, like causing a distraction to divert the situation. Now, there's a few stories I have to share for this one, and that I've been told throughout my work. So one comes from San Jose State University at a frat party. Somebody noticed that there was a girl there and she was highly intoxicated. They noticed that another one of their frat brothers was carrying the girl, like kind of directing her into one of the back rooms. He got a bad feeling about it. We always say, trust your gut. He had a bad feeling. He didn't like what was happening, but he was also scared because this was his frat brother and he didn't want to go up and make assumptions, or he didn't want to have that abuse turned towards him. So instead, what he did is he went up to the guy and said, hey, I think they're out there towing your car. So he's like, what? He freaked out. He left the girl and he went to go check on his car. During this time, the one guy got the girl to her friends and they were able to safely get her out of that situation. Because when somebody is highly intoxicated, they cannot give consent to any sexual activity. So he had a feeling, he felt that she was unsafe, and that's how he helped intervene. Now, another story here. Now, this comes from middle schoolers. There was a fight. There was this big fight happening. They didn't know what to do. This boy happened to have a bag of Skittles in his pocket. He took the Skittles, he threw them over the fight and said, taste the rainbow, really loud. Everybody kind of stopped because it was very unusual, and that broke up the fight. I have another story that comes out from Christmas in the Park in downtown San Jose. They were in their late 20s, just enjoying the park, and this one girl noticed there was a couple that was arguing. The guy had his hand on her shoulder kind of tightly, and the situation just didn't look right. So she sat back and she watched, and she saw it kind of escalating. Nobody around was doing anything. People were walking by. Even there was police officers in, Christmas in the Park that weren't aware of the situation. So what she decided to do is she went up to the young woman involved and said, hey, remember me? I met you at so-and-so's like a while back. And the girl kind of looked confused. And she's like, yeah, remember, I follow you on Instagram. And she held up her phone to the girl. And what she had done before is she had typed in a message saying, hey, are you okay? If you're not okay, come with me. And so after that, she's like, you know what? Our other friends are over here. Why don't you come back with us? And so she's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go back with you. And the guy that was there didn't really have a choice because he didn't want to show the actual abuse that was happening. So the young woman went with the other young woman, and they went away from Christmas in the Park. And she had said, thank you so much. I was really scared. This is, and told the situation that was happening. And so it was just that quick moment, just thinking like, how can I help this person? And how can I get them out of that situation? Now, the boyfriend followed them around for a little while, and then he took off. So they were able to get her into a safe place. So those are some ways that we can intervene in different situations. And not all situations are going to look the same, and not all of these examples are going to work in every single one. But really, it's about being aware of our surroundings, looking out for one another, and thinking, how can I help this person? Always trust your gut. Like if you have that feeling that something isn't right, it's probably a right situation. And if it's not, and everything's okay, well, that's okay too. So let's see. Okay, so some ways that we can help to to be safe bystanders ourselves, but also helping a friend or family member or coworker if they come to us because they are experiencing violence. It's very important to just listen, be there to listen to somebody. If they are sharing that they are in a domestic violence relationship, or maybe they've been sexually assaulted, or are they experiencing sexual harassment or any form of harassment, we want to listen to what they're telling us. We want to make sure we're believing them. Unfortunately, in our society, our society as a whole has a hard time believing survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. So a lot of times survivors don't want to come forward that they're experiencing this from that fear of not being believed. So just you believing them right there can really help to empower them and help them to maybe share their story, maybe report what's happening. We don't want to act shocked, and that could be really hard. If we have somebody that we care about or anybody telling us that they've experienced a really scary situation, sometimes it's hard, we kind of react. But we want to try and take some time and ground ourselves and really listen, because if we freak out, then this person's going to be like, okay, you can't handle this, I'm going to stop talking. And maybe that was the one chance that they had to get their story out. Maybe they're not going to talk anymore. We don't want to invalidate their feelings. Asking why questions. Why questions can be very victim blaming and intimidating. If we're asking, well, why did you go here? Or why were you wearing this? That's putting the blame on the survivor and not putting the blame where it should on the perpetrator. Also, why questions can be triggering, and if they're sharing their experience, again, it could bring up a lot of those feelings that they had during that experience. Confronting the abuser. So we never, if somebody discloses to us, we never want to directly go up to that person and say, wow, I know you did this, why did you do this, and cause another confrontation, because you don't want to put yourself in harm, and also you might put the person that's experiencing that violence back in harm's way. Providing resources and safety planning, especially right now with a shelter in place, is super important. Sometimes people that are in shelter in place that might be experiencing violence, they don't have any other outlet. Maybe they're not going to work anymore, so they can't confide in their coworkers. So providing resources, like on social media, if you have Facebook, just sharing something you learned from like today, or sharing YWCA, be like, hey, YWCA is here to help survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Just putting that out there, because you never know who's on your friends list, who's looking at what you're posting, and you might be able to provide some helpful resources to somebody in need. Safety planning could look like actually coming up with a physical plan if somebody is in harm. Like if somebody is in a domestic violence relationship, they're in the shelter in place, they don't know what to really do. Coming up with a plan for them can be really helpful. Talking about how do we de-escalate situations until we can get to a safe place. Do you have a bag packed where you can just grab it and go? Do you know how can you leave your house? What are the safest place to leave? Who is in your network? Who can you call and talk to if something happens? So this can look like physical and emotionally, just having that emotional support system, because sometimes even when people know that they are in a domestic violence relationship, maybe they're not ready to leave yet. Maybe they don't have an option to leave. Maybe the shelter in place, this is the home that they share with their partner, is the only place they have. The only other option is to be homeless. We know that a lot of people who experience domestic violence and become homeless have a higher chance to be re-victimized out on the street. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't leave. So instead of being like, well, why don't you leave? Why don't you just do this? Kind of providing resources and being like, well, let's try this. Here's an option. Here's an option. You could call YWCA's support line and you can get some other options. If you are that person to help provide resources, then they see that they can come and talk to you about other things. You've opened that door to communication with It's very important that we are not making decisions for them. If somebody has been sexually assaulted or experienced domestic violence, their power and control has been taken away. Our job is to give that power and control back. We want to empower them to make their own decisions to what's safe and for them, because it's different for every survivor. And we don't want to tell their story without permission, and we don't want to make decisions for them and judge their decisions. Even though we might think we know the best thing for this person, we might not. So we need to just listen to them and listen to what they need. How can we help them? How can we support them? In the community, again, believe, support, and listen to survivors. Speak up if you hear oppressive, hurtful, or victim-blaming comments. We want to, again, share resources, and then intervene safely to de-escalate potential harmful situations. So now, if you want, Matthew, we can open it up for any questions or comments, anything like that. I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay. I will probably take a second before people start raising their hands. I wanted to make a comment on your presentation where you mentioned the, I think it was Kitty Genoese incident, which is always brought up when people are talking about intervention and bystander effect and stuff like that. What was interesting is certainly that those effects were there, but everything that happened there was actually, it happened in a LGBT community, and there was probably a lot of other things that enhanced, the bystander effects. Like the community itself was very, I don't want to say scared, but didn't really like the cops. Weren't sure what was going to happen if they called, so they tried to take care of stuff themselves, and so there was low incentive to call the cops and have an intervention. I recommend anybody who is interested in that topic and that particular incident to look that up and find out more information. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Matthew, that's a great point. And especially right now, and some barriers to intervening or getting help, especially in communities of color, is that real fear of the police. And especially right now, even with in like the Latinx community with ICE, there's that real fear of calling to get help. Like, we don't want to invite the police in here, even if we need this help, because we're scared of immigration, even though if a police officer is called to a domestic violence situation or a sexual assault situation, they are not allowed to ask immigration status, but still that fear is real in that community. So thank you for bringing that up, because yes, sometimes people don't want the police involved because they're afraid of the police.
Yeah. So it looks like we got some hands up, and Herman is first. So take it away, Herman.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that many of the suggestions you had relate to situations where there's some physical danger, but the same suggestions apply also to situations that are not quite dangerous, but where someone is telling a racist joke, for example, or making comments that are denigrating to certain races or to women or whatever. Speak up. Say something. It's not an acceptable thing to do anymore. I've noticed that this happens with less frequency now, with the increased awareness we have of Black Lives Matter and minority rights, etc. But it still happens, and I think anyone who tells a story, an anecdote, a joke that a member of a certain community would take exception to should be called out on that. It's just no longer acceptable.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's one thing, when we hear jokes, about communities of color, sexist jokes, things like that, I notice sometimes in a group of large people that I see some people who I know don't agree with it. that they will just kind of like, ha 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 ha, you know, kind of laugh just because they want it to go away. But I'm like, no, we need to not do that, because if you're laughing, then you're telling that person that you agree with what they're saying. So we need to be like, hey, you want to tell me why that, and calling somebody out doesn't necessarily have to be like, you know, like rah, rah, you know, it could just be like, hey, you want to tell me why that's funny? Because I didn't get it. You know, something like that.
Somewhat in this connection, I'd like to point out what I think is a very important article in today's New York Times about one woman's descent into hate. This large article, 2 large pages in the New York Times, relating the story of a woman who sort of descended into hate because she was white, and her initial reaction was, you know, if blacks and Hispanics also take pride in their background, why don't whites do that? And she began to communicate with white supremacists in that regard, and got more and more sucked into that. It's a very interesting article, so I recommend it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody asked about raising the hand in Zoom. To do so, you need to open up the participants window, which is a button at the bottom of your screen if you scroll your mouse over the video. And then once you have the participants window up, at the bottom of the window should be the button for raise hand. If it's not there, it will probably be under the more button. Now, when I say that, that is on my Mac computer, it does it. I'm pretty sure that's the same for Windows computer or any desktop like that. It may be different if you're on an iPad. I don't know where it is on an iPad, but you could try doing the same thing. Also, from the chat, we have a question asking if your slide presentation is online for people who could not attend the Zoom presentation.
It's not online, but I can email it to Alex, because I have Alex's email, and maybe distribute it that way.
I think that'll work. Okay. So, well, we'll have Alex right now. Maybe he can say something. He'll have to unmute himself. Okay, there he goes.
Yeah. Yes, I can probably forward that to get put up on our webpage or something. I was going to comment that I've known at least one woman who mentioned that she left home early because her stepfather was making improper advances, and what she found was that her mother just refused to believe it. It's probably might be a financial thing where he was seen by her as a savior, and she just refused to accept what her daughter was saying. Is that common?
Unfortunately, that is, especially when it comes to child abuse, child physical and sexual abuse. It's become this very like dirty little family secret. Like, people don't want to talk about it. They don't want people to know about it. So that person experiencing that and then internalizes that, and usually that's why we see people disclosing their abuse sometimes years later, because they're afraid. They're afraid of not only of telling, because they've been told this whole time, we don't tell this is a secret, this is this. They're also afraid of the reaction of the family. Like, are my family now going to look at me like I did something wrong? Is my family going to disown me? Because who knows what the abuser was telling this person for so long. Abusers use tactics like grooming to see. At first, they'll start and see how much they can get away with, maybe treating that child like an adult or getting down on that level of a child, providing gifts, extra special attention, and then they will start the abuse. And then they'll be like, this is our secret, if you tell, X, Y, and Z will happen, things like that. So it becomes a really hard thing. And then also with the family members that are in denial about it, because maybe this family member is a great person in the community, or everybody likes them. They're the funny uncle or something like that everybody loves. So that just not believing that actually happened, because them themselves have not experienced that abuse. I always like to say, just because you have not experienced that abuse doesn't mean that person is not abusing someone else. And that can be very hard when disclosures of abuse come up, because we might have this idea of the person, that they're a great person. Oh, we love them. How can this happen? How can this be true? And we need to kind of check our biases at the door when we have somebody telling us that they are being abused, and really listen to what they're saying.
Okay. Somebody in the chat just mentioned on an iPad, you use the more button or the more menu, and you should see the raise hand feature. So anybody on the iPad, that's where you can find it. But we also have a question from Judy. So Judy, you might have to unmute yourself. Oh, I just muted you again. One more time. Judy, one more time. I think we kind of got mixed up.
How's that?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I left the questions, and thank you. I hit participants and raised my hand. I was a board member of the Mid-Peninsula Support Network in Mountain View some years ago, for many years. And what I remember hearing from some of the women who we sheltered were that they didn't expect that their spouse, partner would abuse them, because he was in this case it was a man, he was a highly respected member of the Stanford community. And I think a lot of women fail to report abuse because they feel the social pressure. And of course they blame themselves, which is what the abusers often do. I wouldn't have done that if you had dinner on time or if you had dressed the children better. So the issue of self-blame, I think that you covered, was very important. Are there shelter programs that you recommend, and do you have a list of those that you give to people who contact the Y?
Yeah, so we have a housing department, and we have a rehousing program and emergency shelter. So we do have a shelter that we offer for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. We also work with other agencies in the community. If our shelter is full, then maybe we'll call Next Door Solution, and we'll ask, is your shelter open, or Aki? So we're in contact with all the different agencies, so we all work together to make sure that we are housing people and getting people out of those situations when we can. So yes.
Thank you very much.
And that's true. There's a lot of reasons why women don't report, and also being a survivor of domestic violence myself, I know the process that happens after the abuse when it comes to dealing with the police, dealing with the justice system, going to the court dates and things like that. It's not an easy process. So sometimes people look at it and think like, okay, well, if I want to leave and if I go through this process, is this something I can really do? Because somebody who's already experienced abuse sometimes are re-victimized by our justice system, unfortunately. So that's we like to provide other ways that people can get help, because not everybody wants the same justice. Not everybody wants to report to the police. So maybe just helping that person, empower them, being able to help them get a new housing, get a job, help to get them on their feet again, so they are feeling empowered and they're able to take control back, can be really important as well.
Okay. Back to Herman.
I was just noting that interesting poster you have on the door to your cabinet behind you. Let's make America tolerant again. What a wonderful sign. You should distribute them. I'd like a copy of that. Okay. I mentioned before that I'm offering copies of my Black Lives Matter sign. Already got someone who wrote to me that they'd like one. I have one or two more left. I've been distributing up to 20 of them now. I'll get more. I think it's a good thing to do. So let me know if you want one. You want two?
Black Lives Hands. Look back. Show it.
They can see it.
Okay.
Backwards, but.
Not backwards.
Oh, it's not.
Okay. Thanks, Herman. Cheryl. Cheryl, you're good to go.
Yes. For some reason, my camera won't start, but you can hear me.
Yep.
So just to point out that the services of the YWCA are a lot is funded by private donations. I have been donating to the previous domestic violence services that then the YWCA took over. I've been contributing for the last 30 years annually. So why don't, Erica, don't you put up your address in your street address where you can take donations, because you are a non-profit, a 501c3, and the reason they can do all this marvelous work is because the public give them donations. I know you also get funding from the city and what have you in the county, but I think you still depend on private donations. So thank you very much for your good work. An excellent talk. I learned a bunch of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that and appreciate your support, definitely. I'm putting the address in the chat box right now. We have seen, because of the shelter in place, we have unfortunately not able to host a few of our biggest fundraisers that we do throughout the year. So something, and not everybody can donate right now because times are so tough. So what we've seen people do is set up like peer-to-peer fundraising on Facebook. Like Facebook, there's an option to set up like a donation. Sometimes people do it for their birthday, like, oh, I'm raising money for YWCA. And then that gives an option for your network to donate too. So that's always it's a easy, fun way, like that you don't have, if you can't donate, just setting up a peer-to-peer fundraiser is also good too. So thank you, Cheryl, for that and for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
All right. Alex and Senna again. And looks like you need to unmute yourself, Alex.
Yeah. I wanted to comment again, I've known a situation where a child was treated inappropriately by an adult, and it came out and there was a big to-do about it, and his behavior changed, but no one spoke to her about it. And I think it's very important, even if there don't seem to be any problems there, to discuss this situation with the child, because there are going to be effects, probably going to be effects later on.
Whoa. Cheryl is muted, or I mean,
Cheryl.
No.
There we go.
I'm not asking to talk.
Okay, thank
Cheryl's
you.
unmuted. There we go. Finally, Erica. Sorry about that.
No worries. I had to mute myself. My daughter came in and asked me a question, so I had to mute really quick.
Okay.
Yes, Alex, it is so important that we talk to young people to talk about and that they can stand up for themselves, letting them know that they make decisions for their body. They're the only ones that can make decisions for themselves, and they get to decide what feels safe and comfortable for their bodies. That is something that we start talking to children in our school-based program. We start talking to kids in kindergarten. And it's all age appropriate, but just talking about like the personal bubble. If somebody wants to come in your bubble, they have to ask first. So now we're planting the seed on consent without even saying the word consent. So if we start having these conversations super early, then as they grow older, they understand, because kids are experiencing relationships in middle school. They're already talking about these kind of things. So it's important that we talk to them about it so they can make safe decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I also want to say it's important to point out that this is not the child's doing.
Yes.
regardless of what the situation was.
Yes, and that is something we talk to kids when we give examples about abuse, and we let them know, we'll ask, is this the child's fault? And the kids know. They say, no, this isn't. And we're like, you're right. It's never a child's fault when somebody is abusing them. And just because that's also a real fear that children have, or a lot of people have, if they're being abused, they think it's their fault. They brought them on themselves, like they were bad kids. So that, and also that's something that an abuser might also tell them. So they start internalizing those feelings and believing that. So it's important that we say, no, it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. This is the perpetrator's fault. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anybody else with their hands up, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. I just got the Twitch chat up. I forgot to start that earlier. If anybody on Twitch had questions, please repost your questions in the chat, because I don't see anything right now. But I think we're going to go ahead and move to general discussion. So I'm going to open up allow everybody to unmute themselves, and we'll do a general discussion. So as a reminder, if more than one person is talking at the same time, we probably can't hear anybody. So try to be careful about not talking over each other as much as possible. And also I want to add this time, in the past, we've had problems with like some background noise, and particularly with like couples if they're talking to each other. Kind of it's encroaching on the, or it's being picked up by your mic and added to the Zoom chat. So what I will do is, if I'm hearing a lot of noise from somebody and they're not actually participating in the chat, I will mute them. And so you'll have to just pay attention and double check to make sure you are unmuted if you actually have something to add to the conversation. But at this time, I'm going to allow everybody to unmute themselves, and we can get into a general discussion. So you should be good to go. It looks like everybody is unmuting and ready to join the chat. Any questions or comments?
So Erica, this is Ray. I have a question. If you'd care to share, you have a lot of experience in and education in this, and I'm wondering if you've had any personal experiences where you were out in public and saw something and were able to intervene.
Not when it comes to domestic violence or sexual assault. I have not, that I have actually been able to intervene. I think that when I started doing this work, I can look back and think about all the times that I've seen stuff, and I'm like, I didn't even know that's what that was. I didn't know that I should have intervened in this, situation. So now I feel like my job now is just to educate everybody to see these situations, so we could be more aware, so we can intervene. Most of the experience that I've had, and I work with young people a lot, is mainly them coming to me with these situations that have already happened and then trying to figure out what the next step is. But personally, I have not experienced that. It's mainly the after the intervention now. Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. Ray, I just thought of one. So before I started working at the YWCA, I actually was a bartender for a very long time. And so I would see all kinds of things. And one time, a regular came in late at night, and she came in and she had a glass of wine, her normal drink that she would always have. She had a person with her that I did not recognize. And so I served her and her guest drinks. After her first glass of wine, she was completely intoxicated. more so than a glass of wine would do. And so it really brought concern, because it was where I was looking at her and her eyes were not focusing. She was looking behind me like she wasn't understanding what I was saying, and I could not understand her. The person she was with then said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll take her home." And I was like, "Who are you? Like, do you know her? Because I know her and I've seen her come in on a regular basis, and I don't know you." And I got some of the other regulars. I was like, "Do you know him? Do you know him?" And nobody knew him. And we're like, "Okay, so where does she live? Like, how do you know her?" And he was kind of not giving us straight answers. I'm like, "Well, you know what? I'm going to feel more comfortable," because she was starting at this point to look like she was going to be sick or have a medical emergency. So I called 911. And we got the ambulance out and they took her. And he still was like, "Oh no, I'll take her." I'm like, "Okay, well, why don't you wait till the police come, and then you can talk to them, and maybe, you could figure out that." And he's like, "Oh," and then he disappeared. So the emergency services came, they got her and took her to the hospital. My concern was that he put something in her drink, because when she came into the bar, she was not intoxicated. I served her one glass of wine, and then she was not even coherent. And he was trying to take her home. So that was me saying, "I don't think this is safe. I want to get her some actual help." And the ambulance took her, and she did come in after that, and she said, "Thank you." And she didn't even know who we were talking about. She didn't know the person. So.
You mentioned nightlife. Do you know if people that work in nightlife are generally trained to kind of spot this stuff?
They're not. And unfortunately, something that actually we're trying to work on is having a bar prevention program, to where we talk to the bartenders, we talk to the bouncers to look for things like that. I know in different states they do have them, but we don't have anything like that here in Santa Clara County. And for being a bartender for so long, I see how important it is to have something like that, people who are trained to spot it, because that is something that happens very often in the club and bar industry.
I had a situation some years ago. I was teaching a course at the Biz School at Stanford, and one of the women came up to me and said, asked if I would walk her to her car. I said, "Sure, where are you?" And she told me, and it was a well-lit place. And I said, "Are you concerned about something?" And she said, "Well, my boyfriend has been following me." I said, "We can call campus security, and they'll escort both of us there." And she said, No, he would get mad. So a couple people in the class heard the conversation, and a small group said, "We'll walk out there. We're parked there." So we had 4 or 5 people, men and women, who went out with us. Everything was fine. No one was lurking, and we sent her off. I wondered at the time if I made a bad decision by not calling campus security, because she was afraid it would escalate it. But I felt at least rescued, and that it worked out okay.
Well, and sometimes we can't make those decisions for people, because in their situation, they know what's best for them. And maybe, but you still offered support, and you still offered to get her to her car. And just that right there, again, you've opened that communication to, if something else maybe comes up later, then she could come to you, and, you can maybe offer some more support. Because again, we don't know everybody's situation. They could be different. So we don't want to escalate something for somebody. So maybe calling, that could have been more danger than good. So I think what you did was you handled it great.
How about medical situations, not abuse or anything, just where people are afraid, even with a good Samaritan law or whatever it is, that they try to help, and they're so worried that something that will go wrong and it'll be their fault or they'll be blamed, that they don't intervene. Do you have a program or ways to help people be relieved that it's okay to try to do that?
Yeah, we don't have a program here at YWCA, but generally that's part of being a safe bystander, even in all situations, not just when it comes to, sexual assault, domestic violence. to be able to step up, because it still comes, I think, with that diffusion of responsibility, like even with medical emergencies. I've seen that, like a couple weeks ago, there was someone that was on the ground. I was driving home and he was just laying on the ground in a very kind of awkward area to where somebody wouldn't just like take a nap. I do live in an area where there are a lot of unsheltered people, but still something just stood out. He didn't look like he was unsheltered. So to me, it looked like, what if he had just had a stroke or something? I'm like, oh, well, he's laying in an area, cars are driving by. Somebody has probably called the cops. And then I thought about it. I'm like, well, what if nobody did? So I did just call 911, and it was right down the street. And after a call, about like 3 minutes later, I heard the sirens coming. So maybe nobody did call the cops. It's just that I thought like I thought he needed help, so I called. That's kind of how I see it with those other medical situations.
Well, I had an experience. I was helping a teacher when I was in junior high, and I did get somebody to come and help when this teacher tried to stand up, and I think she had had some kind of a stroke. She had bent down to pick something up that had dropped, and her voice was very raspy. She had very difficult, couldn't really stand up. And I did get somebody in the class to go get another teacher to help, because I don't know that we didn't have 911 per se. We had something, I'm sure, but I remember that.
Yeah, and I know that is a real fear though too, like not wanting to, you trying to help and then getting, sued or something for doing something that might have caused more harm. So the way I think about it, if I see somebody that needs help, I am not a medical professional, so I would never try and do something like if I saw somebody that was in danger, like I need like to get out of a car or something. But otherwise, I think general rule is not, moving anybody or touching anybody unless necessary. Calling the people that know, what to do, is following their rules.
Eileen, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Thank you. This was just the other day. I live in San Francisco, and I was driving up Portola, which is like the extension of Market Street, and there was a man lying on the sidewalk, just flat on his face. He did not look like he was, normal. So I couldn't stop because there was no way to pull over there. So I went up a few more feet, actually, and stopped at this gas station. And I said to the man, "There's a guy in the gas station. There's a guy lying on the ground. I think he needs help." So he gave me the phone, and I talked to 911, and they said, "Oh, we already got a call in." And then I said, "Okay, great." So, and then as I went back out to my car, this other man was standing there, and he said, "Oh my God, I saw that man. He had blood all over his face and blood on his shirt." So anyhow, people are in a good situation. And hopefully, and obviously they were already on the way to come and get him. So hopefully okay, I don't know. I thought maybe he had a stroke or something and just fell flat on his face.
Good for Eileen and Erica for handling those situations so well.
I'm sorry, what?
I said good for you and for Erica for handling those situations so well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Obviously, I wasn't the only one who was concerned, so that was good to know that people in San Francisco driving up that street also were concerned when they saw him lying there.
Parts of Portola, my sister used to live there until we moved to Arizona. Parts of Portola are very steep, and not as steep as Hyde and some of the other ones that the cable cars run on, but it is a difficult walk, even if nothing else has happened, even if you're not getting accosted.
Right, but obviously something bad had happened to him because he was flat on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
He did not look like he was there on purpose.
Yeah.
So I think he must have, had a stroke or a heart attack or something like that. But
something occurred to me while I was listening. I was at a class, I guess, in Palo Alto years ago, and a woman in the row behind me appeared to have fallen asleep. and her head tilted back, and she was kind of snoring, but it was so quick that a couple people laughed, and we looked around, and then I thought, maybe there's something wrong with her. So the instructor came over, and she had some sort of an attack that they called 911. So it's bizarre what kind of health situations may happen that look like a person is asleep, or maybe that they're drunk, or perhaps they're having a diabetic reaction and are behaving strangely. So you never know quite what to do, but I think just showing concern and speaking to a person in charge is helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes checking our bias of what we think of people, because sometimes, you know, especially like maybe with unsheltered people that might look a little different, and instead of just thinking, oh, you know, well, they're on drugs or they're this or they're that, like maybe there is something really going on with them, you know, maybe it's more than that, like maybe they do need help. I think that sometimes just in society in general, we've kind of like pushed some people into a box, like, oh, they're just crazy or they're just this, you know, when that might not be the situation, and maybe they really need help, they just don't know how to get that help for themselves. So sometimes
I think somehow that some people who are unsheltered could have a heat stroke reaction because either their clothes are in a shopping cart or they're wearing them because they have no other way to carry them, and in a hot day, that could have a major effect on them.
Yeah.
A few times I've spotted instances on the side of the road. Generally, it's not someplace where I can stop conveniently, but if I get a chance, I'll pull over, call the police, and describe it, and I never know what happens after that. I never know if it was really worth the phone call. But if it looks like it might be, I'll call it in. No, yeah. There's a pile of clothes in the middle of the road, and it was a big enough pile that someone could be buried in them. And I felt, well, that we should do something about that. But it was a freeway, so I pulled over to the next exit.
And the worst, you know, that can happen is maybe then someone's not experiencing anything and they're okay. So, you know, that's okay. We've, you know, at least done our part to at least try and help.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I would say trust your gut, because usually our intuition is pretty, like, we all have that. We could kind of tell, if something's telling you like something's not right for any reason, you always kind of might just check a little more into that and see what that is. What's that? Why are you feeling this way? Or why are these feelings coming up in this situation?
I had one more experience in New York that I can tell you about, and that is crossing a busy street. Someone coming in the opposite direction toward me stumbled and started to fall. And instinctively, I rushed out to grab him before he fell and helped him. And he proceeded to go, and I went. 2 minutes later, I discovered that my purse was empty. My shoulder purse had been stolen. Apparently, this is a game that they play in New York.
Oh, no.
They attract your attention to help somebody, whereas another person then robs you. So be aware of that.
Distraction.
I did the right thing.
Yeah, I had an experience, what could have been an experience at Victoria Station in London. Some woman accosted me, not random, just spoke to me and said, "Can you help me?" And it was clear to me that she was a confidence person, because any suggestion to talk to the police meant, oh no, she would find out, she would be found out, whatever she was trying to get help with. I mean, whatever, I can't remember the problem, but whatever her problem was, if it was a legitimate problem, the police would have helped her. But no, she's trying to accost a perfect stranger in order to get the sympathy and take advantage of them of me in some way. So I said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and I walked away quickly.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. I mean, I've had similar experiences, and you have to kind of decide. But thank you for sharing.
And one other thing I was going to say is that I don't think I looked bewildered, but I think I looked like I was a traveler who, even though I was in a relatively familiar place, she thought maybe she could take advantage of somebody who she might be able to rob because I'm a traveler from the U.S. I must have money.
I had an interesting experience just a few years ago, and it ties into the fact that I learned a long time ago that sounds move in strange ways. I was living at the Broadmoor Hotel on Sutter Street in San Francisco, and my room faced Gough, but it faced the courtyard, not Gough Street. So sounds from Gough Street would go over and hit a wall and bounce back at me. And one night I'd just gone to bed and I heard someone hollering out on Gough Street for help. And of course my first reaction was, well, there are people out there on the street, and I'm in bed, so something will happen. Well, I kept hearing this help. So I called 911. And I told them that there was somebody on Gough Street between Sutter and Post Street yelling for help, and they said they would send out someone to check it. And I kept hearing the help, and I kept hearing it. So I got dressed, and I went downstairs, and I told the people at the desk that somebody out there was calling for help. So I went out and I walked all the way around the block, and it was as peaceful as it could be, and there was nobody out there yelling for help. I came back into the lobby, and they met me, and they said, it was the man below you who fell out of his bed. But the way the sound came, it never would have dawned on me it was coming from below me. But they went and checked and found this poor guy had fallen out of bed.
So Eileen, you can just go ahead and jump in.
Okay, I had an experience of sexual harassment. I used to work at the IRS, and this was like many years ago, maybe 40 years ago, when I was young. And anyhow, I was in a group of all men engineers, and I was an appraiser, and all these people were they had like 3 or 4 desks, and then they'd have a divider, and then 3 or 4 desks and a divider. So I had stayed after work. I was working on something, and I had stayed after everybody had left, and then this one guy in the group who was a few dividers away started panting like he was masturbating, and he went on and on and on, and I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. And then the next day, this was a group of men that all went to break in the morning together. So we all went down for break, and I said, do you know what George did last night? And I told them, and he never spoke to me again. He was so mad at me for telling him. If you didn't want to, I didn't go to the bosses. I mean, those days, you didn't really feel like you had the right to fight openly about it, but I made it clear that it was not something he was going to do without hearing about it. And knowing the other guys, I'm sure they tormented him unmercifully.
Good. I'm glad you stood up for yourself, because it could be a scary thing to do.
Well, I wasn't scared of him, but I was disgusted. I thought, and he was married and he had children. I mean, it was not a nice thing to do. It was.
Eileen, you seem to be such a nice person. I'm surprised you work for the IRS.
Yeah.
What? You're surprised I worked for the IRS, or he did? What did he say?
He said you worked for the IRS.
I worked.
I said I was surprised to hear that because you look like such a nice person.
The IRS people are nice people.
A lot of nice people in the IRS, but
it's the tax code that's not nice.
The IRS, I'm here to help. That's saying. Help you pay more taxes. Anyhow, it was a good job, and I'm glad I was going to be a teacher, but that didn't work out, so I ended up in the IRS, and now I'm comfortably ensconced with a pension. So thank God for that.
Got out of it. Lowercase God.
What?
Lowercase God.
Thank goodness.
There are certain words that are not acceptable in this group.
I'm a very strong atheist. When I was 5 years old, I asked my mother, does God exist? And she said, make up your own mind. And I thought, nah, it's ridiculous. And I never believed in it for a minute. And my mother was an atheist also, so, but I'm glad to say no. She said, make up your own mind too. She was a good mother. I miss.
I would say thank your union.
Thank my union?
Yeah, for your pension.
Oh, for my paycheck, yeah. Well, I was in the union. I did a lot of work for the union, so the union was good. But, we didn't have that much power because it was a federal agency. We couldn't strike, but we could do stuff. And I helped a lot of people that were having problems. So
I'm thinking in particular the pension.
Oh, yeah, believe me, that is a wonderful thing. A wonderful thing. Thank God. Thank goodness for that.
Yes.
Thank the union for that. Well, I think all federal employees get a pension. And the feds, the state and the city of San Francisco, California and San Francisco, have better pensions. But I'm happy with mine. So... Marion, don't you have...
I don't recognize you have to talk about.
Oh, I was a little concerned about the situation that we just heard about. It sounds as though there was a man who was in a workplace where everyone had gone home, who had no way of knowing there was anybody else in eyesight within earshot. But somebody could have called out, is anybody there? And then you would have known that he wasn't alone. But as far as it sounds like, we didn't know that. He was engaged in a personal experience that wasn't hurting anybody, involved only himself. And then the person who knew about it went and told all his coworkers about it.
No, he was doing it to me. Believe me, he was not just doing it for himself. He was purposely pointed towards me going like that. It wasn't something that he was really doing for himself.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the demonstration.
It was very clear that it was like, in his mind, a joke. Or I just didn't like the joke.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. No problem.
I don't want to leave at this interesting moment, but I wanted to thank you, Erica and the Y, for this program, and I do need to leave, but thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks to Cheryl Spencer, who sent a note around to our Women's International League for Peace and Freedom members to try to catch this. That's why I asked about your slide presentation, which I'll forward to those who couldn't attend.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
We're not all leaving.
Yeah, just me.
I keep on turning off and it keeps on turning itself back on. How come your sign is backwards? And to somebody on the Nick, how come your sign is imagine there's
What's that? Is it
the sign behind you is backwards?
Well, thank you for telling me, because I've had problems with this. On my screen, it's right, so evidently I have to flip it for you to see it, right? Thank you. Now, if I can figure out how to do it, I will do it.
I'm trying to figure out how to get something for me, but I'm not even sure what it's going to be. I know you need a green screen to do this kind of thing, but I haven't even decided on my background. This great dark background where I have to worry about having the fan in the way is a problem. Because if I turn on the light under the fan, then it's too bright.
the sign behind me saying Black Lives Matter is reversed when I look at it on the screen.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a mirror thing, and it drives me crazy.
Can you see it the right way, or how does it look to you, the Black Lives Matter sign?
It's right for us.
It's correct, yeah.
Okay, well, that's the important thing. But seriously, for me, it's backwards, so I'll leave it there.
I just want to say thank you for for inviting us in to have these conversations. I really appreciate everyone being open to talk about this and inviting us in to chat with y'all. It seems like you all have a really good group here. It's very interesting. I know I know Megan, I think, came before and she talked to y'all about, I think it was sexual assault. So we appreciate you inviting us to speak with you. So
thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.